Hi everybody, welcome back to this next video on the 7 Hermetic Lots, which is a bit of an intermediate video because I need to make a rectification, and I will present it in this video. And the reason why I needed this rectification has to do with the next video actually, because I studied Schmidt's intensive on the Hermetic Lots again to come to grips with this next video, not this one but the one that's following this, and I noticed something that needed rectification because in his postscript I read about it, and of that seminar he appended a postscript, and that had quite an interesting view on the importance of the formula and the reversal of the formula. So I have to do it now, this rectification, so it's important for the next video for coming to grips with that topic. So before I read this particular postscript by Robert Schmidt, I must say that I quite struggled with the significations of the lots based on the template that I presented to you in the webinar on Acuta's page, and also a video I did on the symbolization of these formula and how they could be used to as sort of a template to come to grips with what they meant. And that's what I'm going to rectify in this video, because what defines what is quite important and is a bit different than I thought at first. So in order to remain faithful to Schmidt's approach and his conceptualization of the lots, I do need to do this rectification so you can study this topic further with the right tools in hand. So I'm apologizing for the mistake I made, but it's very important to go on with our study and get to grips with this very important and very interesting piece of ancient lore. So you will see in the next video how Schmidt used this template to come to grips with two lots calculated with fortune and the daimon, which was called basis by Valens. But that's for the next video. In this one I will rectify the things I did wrong in the previous videos, at least as far as the symbolization of the formula was concerned. So let's have a look at it. Now, both in the webinar, the larger introduction to this topic of the 7 Hermetic Lots on the website of Acuta, I introduced this formula trying to get to grips to the meaning of the several lots. And I stated it like this: move planet C to the ascendant, planet B moves along, and as soon planet C arrives on a portion of the ascendant, planet B stops at the place where the said lot part is in the chart. Well, that still remains the same, but the interpretation of planet C and B differs a bit. So let's have a look at that. So what is moved to the ascendant, planet C? That is what the lot is about, and that is still understood that way, so that doesn't change. But what does change is this: the planet that locates the lot, that's always planet B, which moves in the images. At first I said planet B is what defines planet C, but this is, according to Schmidt, this is not quite correct, at least as far as Hermetic Lots are concerned. It is B that is defined and determined by C. So it's the planet that locates the particular lot part is the one that is defined and determined by planet C. So let's have a look at that, because when we look at fortune, you can see that it's the ascendant plus the moon minus the sun, and the interpretation has to be something like this. So the moon is defined and determined by the sun, see, and that's the cosmic principle of life. The sun defines and determines sort of impregnates the principle of embodiment and materiality which is signified by the moon. And that has to do with everything that befalls you, because it's already been produced in reality. It's also it's a fact of life, so to speak. So that's for the part of fortune, the ascendant of the moon. But then we come to the diamond. That's the other way around. There you have the moon, which defines and determines the sun. So B, the sun, is defined and determined by C, the moon. So the cosmic principle of embodiment, materiality, the moon, defines and determines the principle that incites action. So the diamond is often interpreted as everything in the world around you that incites you to take action. So that really quite interestingly is reversal of what I said before in the previous videos, but this is actually the ones that makes more sense to me, because as I said in the opening of this video, I really struggled with the symbolism as I explained it in the first take on this, and this one is more correct, I think, in my view, when you take the definitions of fortune and diamond. So let's have a look at the several Hermetic lots based on this approach. So as I said, a rectification is in order, and let's have a look at the diamond lots. Now Schmidt literally said the defining component in a spirit lot is the lot of spirit, which is action, planet C, and it is the planet B that gets defined in relation to the lot. So if at first I said, which was the wrong conclusion, by what is action defined? It is defined by Venus. And what is by what is action defined in the case of Jupiter? It's defined by Jupiter itself. But now the different approach ought to be, so what does action define? This action defines Venus. Why? Because Eros is everything done because of desire. So the actions of Eros are defined by the action itself, but it's in the name of Venus. And the same goes for Jupiter, but perhaps you can see why I found this so confusing, because it's the first statement I made is actually also quite true. You could also say by what I said previously. So the action defines Aphrodite and Venus and Zeus Jupiter as to what is done and why it is done. So action is undertaken because of Venus and Jupiter issues. So okay, that makes sense. Now you could say that this new interpretation really makes sense, because when you look at the lot of Eros, I define them as things, aspecting planets that arouse desire, that you long for and put your heart on, that stimulate you to take action. And Schmidt said that the spirit lots have a signification for a faculty of the soul, which are two, desire and hope or trust. So you could also say that in the new definitions of how the formula works, the action actually defines something of Venus and it defines something of Jupiter, the things you do out of desire and the things you do out of trust or hope. So that's quite interesting because it makes sense as well. So Eros and victory signify and they point to things done by deliberate choice. That's also very important because in the next video I will show how the Tuche lots, the lots relating to fortune, do not have anything to do by deliberate choice, but the consequences of actions which have resulted into situations that you have to deal with, which is quite a different thing as opposed to the diamond lots. I found the rectification as used to the fortune lots more convincing, as I will explain in this slide. Schmidt said the defining component in a fortune lot is the planet C, while it is the lot of fortune, Tuche B, that gets defined in relation to it. And that makes more sense to me as opposed to the diamond lots, because that was the struggle I was having. I found this one more convincing because what is defining fortune, B, it's always the planet's principle, the planet that is moved to the ascendant in the formula. So you could say that the planets are defining and determining stuff with relations to 2G, the B factor in these calculations. So 2G, worldly fated things happening because of mercurial, Martial or Saturnine issues. So 2G determined and defined by these three planets. So at first I said, by what is Mercury defined? By fortune. No, it's the other way around. By what is 2G defined? It's defined by Mercury. And in the formula of courage, 2G is defined by Mars issues. And in the case of Nemesis, 2G is defined by Saturnine issues. As I said, these alterations in the explanation of these formula makes more sense to me in the case of these fortune lots, but that's okay, because we can still try to find out about the diamond lots, how they function, and in the next video we'll also introduce another principle of that based on this new interpretation of the formula, the new template for trying to find out what these lots are about. So let's have a look at necessity. It's pretty obvious that the things of 2G, the planet B, of the factor B, is defined and determined by Mercury, the planet C, the one that moves to the ascendant. And everything you read there has to do with the things produced by Mercury as 2G, the fatedness of the mercurial principles. And that's the same with courage and Nemesis, of course. Now Schmidt said that in the case of the fortune lots, we see delineation more in terms of events that befall the native. These are restrictive events in the case of necessity, exposures and loss, resulting in grief and nemesis and plots and villainies in the case of courage. All determinations of the lot of fortune relative to one of the malefics and Hermes. Now you could also say that the fortune lots have sort of already happened, and the consequences now present themselves to you as 2G. And well, that really makes it clear what's going on here. And it's interesting to notice that Bernati calls the diamond spirit lot pars futurorum, the lot of things to come. So these fortune lots have already happened, but the diamond lots are things to come, which are not yet there, but have to be chosen by the native, and then they will come to be. So they are by means of assent to what is shown to you and how you react to it. The things giving you hope, in the case of Jupiter, and in connection with the diamond, and things that arouse desire, in the case of Venus and Eros. So that's quite obvious. So let me redo one of the slides I did in a previous demonstration, the composing template for the significations of these lots. And this is what's actually not correct in what I just said. So what is moved to the ascendant is what the lot is about. The planet that locates a lot is what defines a planet on the ascendant. So that is not correct. I'm going to change this to this. As I stated in an earlier slide, what is moved to the ascendant? Okay, we're still talking about Mars in this case, but now the planet that locates the lot, the planet B, is not the one that defines it, but it's the one that is determined and defined by the planet Mars in this case. So Mars determines the moon, Mars defines the sun, and not the other way around. It's not that Mars is defined by the moon, but it's like this. The moon as defined by Mars, etc. So that's quite different. So let's have a look at what I said there and try to correct this, rectify it. So again, be very specific, because we're still talking about the third level in our path downward. We're still talking about the worldly level. So now this is what I said at first. The ascendant plus Jupiter minus Mars. It is Mars as defined by Jupiter, so by happiness, contentment, children, the law, etc. So I concluded that must have been high expectations with regards to children or happiness from or with children, because Mars is defined by Jupiter. But Now we see that it's the other way around. So what can we say about it then? Stated the other way, we get Jupiter, children, the law, as defined and determined by Mars, which is the indicator, significator of men and boys, and also brothers. So you can say that we're talking about high expectations with regard to boys, male children, or happiness from or with boys, male children. So now we are talking about high expectations with regard to boys, and that's exactly Jupiter as defined by Mars, because Mars has to do with boys and Jupiter has to do with childbirth. So you can state this in this way as well. So if we take the new reasoning, we are determining something of Jupiter, the planet indicating the location of the lot, the signifier of birth, which is defined and determined by Mars, the boy-man signifier. So the planet moved to the ascendant, that is Mars, so boys get defined by the birth signifier. And Alberuni says, condition of the male children gives the part of lawsuits, law as defined by battle and conflict. So I reversed the signification and did it like this. Now, if you look at the ascendant plus Saturn minus Mars, then would then have to do with Mars defining Saturn issues, which is pretty obvious when you see the significations of this lot. Accusation. Mars, of course, is the one defining Saturn in this case, so you get accusations because that's what Mars does. Mars is on the attack. Afflictions, hate, injury, health, illness, that's indeed the same principle of Saturn being defined by Mars. So let's have a look again at another slide that I used to try to define this template and use it for an explanation for the significations of this lot. The ascendant plus the moon minus Mars. So at first I thought it was Mars as defined by the moon, but now we have to do it the other way around. It is the moon as defined by Mars. That's the actual signification of this little trick by using the planets in the formula to get to the one-liners for these lots, based on what I read in and listened to in the Hermetic Lot tutorial by Robert Schmidt. So let's have a look. At first I said, why would this be modesty? Why would this be a one-liner for this particular lot? Well, the forwardness, cheekiness and boldness that Mars normally has is defined by the timid and cautious moon. So that results in the forwardness of Mars being defined now by timidity, which results in modesty. When we turn this around, it should be something like this. So why modesty? In this case, in the new definition, we see that Mars is the one that's defining and determining the normally timid and cautious moon. So she is defined by the forwardness, the cheekiness and the boldness that Mars normally has. So the timidity of the moon is now defined and determined by the forwardness of Mars, and the result is modesty. Now I must say that I found this pretty far-reached and far-reaching, and not always. What I'm trying to say is that I found this quite difficult to understand and get to grips with because of this new definition. I find the previous one that I showed you before this little slide alteration is more convincing to me, but okay, let's have a look at another one. So why slaves? In ancient times, slaves were referred to as bodies, which is the signification of the moon, and Mars has to do with hard work. So work defined and carried out by bodies, slaves, which is work. That's again, this is the previous understanding of this lot reversal, of this lot. But when I reverse it, then you get this. So bodies, the moon, defined by Mars, and determined by work. So okay, that's pretty convincing for the use of the one-liner slaves for this lot. And also the ascendant plus the moon minus Mercury is also called slaves. So I would add children, because now there's something else in this this formula. And the last one that I showed you was this one. Mars is always associated with everything having to do with labor, working on and working with. That's the moon, material girl. The moon is associated with the material world, as I've shown in the webinar, and Mars has to do with hard work, so skill in working on material in general. But this could also be reversed. So material in general as defined and determined by Mars, which is skill and technique. So I think that's these are pretty convincing examples as well. The first one not so much, because I think that modesty really more is like the influence of the moon on Mars and not the opposite. But okay, let's keep it at that. So this concludes my rectification of this reversal, sorry, not a reversal, but the use of the formula in trying to use it as a template for the one-liners that are given in the ancient texts to the signification of the lots. And I needed to do this rectification because in the next video I will address this particular problem, the issue that there is a calculation given for a formula of a lot which uses both fortune and a diamond, and these are also called errors and necessity, and the two authors that give these formulas, Veges Valens and Firmicus Maternus, both use it reversely. So that's a problem, and this lot is called basis by Valens, which Rhetorius called the foundation of fortune, which is a very interesting remark. So the question will be in this next video, what is their meaning and signification, and where do they fit in this scheme? And for this particular issue, Schmidt uses explicitly the way he used the formula and the symbolization of them, as I just explained in this rectification. So please join me for this next video, and I hope to meet you there again. Bye and stay safe.